Recording in progress. Tov, Beseder, Yafeh, Boker Tov. So we are Masechet Beitzah Daf Yud Amud Alef. We got up to, so we saw the Mishnah, right? I'll just read the Mishnah again quickly. It says, Beit Shammai Amrim, Lo Yitol Elam Ken Ne'anami Ba'od Yom, Ubeit Hillel Omrim, Omed V'omer, Zeh V'zeh Ani Notel. So our Mishnah is dealing with the issue of Muktzah. You have all these birds, and only one or two of them you're going to, you want to kill and eat for your Yom Tov meal. So it requires hachana, it requires hazmana before Yom Tov. So according to Beit Shammai, you need to go and you need to lift up the birds, physically lift up the birds before Yom Tov to know which ones it is that you want to eat. Because if you don't do that, we're concerned, Beit Shammai are worried that you may not, when it comes to Yom Tov itself, you'll pick up the birds for the first time, you'll say, nah, I don't really want to kill this one. I'm going to leave this one here. I'm going to take another one. And then you've ended up picking up muktzah for no need, and that is a problem. Beit Hillel say, no, we don't need to go that far. So long as you stand there and you point, and you say, Zeh v'zeh ani notel, these are the ones I want, that is okay. You don't have to go physically pick them up. Rav Chanan bar Ami said in the Gemara, he qualified that the machloket is only relating to the first brecha rishona, right? As we explained yesterday, Rashi told us that the way these birds, that the first set of offspring from the season, the male and the female, those are, generally speaking, those are kept, and those you would not shech. And therefore with those, says Beit Shammai that you need to go and you need to physically lift them up so that there won't be a problem of muktzah. But for the others, everybody agrees. And then the Gemara got into this issue of breira. Right? We said, why do Beit Hillel say, why do they say, Zeh v'zeh ani notel? Why can't they just say, Mikan ani notel? That you say you're going to make a generic statement that you're going to take birds from that dovecote, but you don't have to say which ones. And the answer is, that would be a case of breira, right? Which means, we have a machloket rachas, yesh brela or ein brela, which essentially when you have something, or you do something, or you choose, or you purchase something, or you indicate something, which only later on it's going to become clear what it was referring to. That is called breira. So in this case, if you're just to point at the birds and say, I'm going to take from here, but you're not going to say which ones, and afterwards on Yom Tov you go and you pick two of them up, so we say retroactively, when you said I was going to take from here, it's referring to these two birds, and all the others are muktzah. I couldn't have known that at the time, but I know that later on. That is what's called breira. By the way, everybody agrees that if we say breira, we're talking about for something that's going to happen in the future. You can't say breira now over something that's already happened in the past. That's going to be problematic. But essentially, the Gemara says like this. So we say, why don't Beit Hillel say ani notel mikan? So let's pick it up, I guess, more or less 4 lines from the bottom of the Gemara, right where the Gemara starts. So 4 lines below that. Beit Hillel lama le'lamei mazeh v'zeh ani notel leima mikan ani notel lemachar. Why does Beit Hillel have to say taking this and this one? Why can't they just say I'm taking from here? That would be a case of breira. So if you're going to answer back and say the reason Beit Hillel don't do it is because of breira, and they don't hold by breira, so now the next till the end of the Amud, more or less, we're going to try and prove that that is not the case. We're going to try and prove that Beit Hillel do hold by this principle of breira. It's related to a case where you have a met inside a house, and the question is where the tumat oil, how far it's going to extend. It's a little bit complicated, but let's work through it. So we have a Mishnah in Oholot that says the following. It says, V'hatnan, hamet babayit, v'lo ptachim arbe, kulan tmei. So if you have a met inside a house, now with tumat met, so we know there are different forms of tumah, different ways of contracting the tumah. For most of us nowadays, it's not a problem. For the Kohanim amongst us, this is something that you have to be careful of. But there is tumat maga, which is where you come into contact with something. There is tumat masa, which is where you are carrying something, even if you're carrying it on your back, where tumat masa applies, even though you don't have a direct contact. And then there is tumat ohel, which is unique to a mate. So wherever you have an ohel, and again, very complex, well, the Masechet Ohalot discusses what is considered an ohel and what's not. But essentially, if things are under the same roof together with the mat, everything there would contract tuma. So the kelim that are inside the house, when the mate is there, those kelim would all become tameh as well. So the Mishnah here tells us, so you have lots of entrances. I guess you have lots of doorways. So it says kulam tmeim. All of them are going to be tameh. So what does that mean? Have a look at Rashi, the first long line in Rashi. He says, "V'lo ptachim habe." In this house, there are many entrances. Kulam ptuchim or kulam skulim. Okay, we'll see why in a moment. But at this point, let's assume all the entrances are open or they're all closed. Let's assume right now they're all open. It's going to be easier to understand. Says Rashi, kulam tmeim. Kol kelim amunachim b'chalal ptachim. All the kelim that are there in the house, in the space of these entrances, tachat ovi hatikra shel petach tmeim. Everything that's underneath the ceiling of where that entrance extends, that's all going to be tameh. Even though it's not under the same roof as the met, shegazru chachamim tuma al makom shu derech yetziat tuma. Says Rashi, because chachamim made a gzera. There's a lot that's said about this Rashi, because over here Rashi says it's a gzera d'Rabbanan, but in a different place he says that this halacha is actually halacha Moshe Misinai, which would be d'oraita to a certain level. So, but in any event, the halacha is that on the entrances where the met is going to be taken out, that there's going to be tumah there as well. Because ultimately he's going to go there. Since in this case we don't know through which entrance the met is going to be taken out, we say all of them are going to be tameh. Okay, so essentially the case is this. We have a house, we have a room. The words bayit and ched, house and room in Chazal many times are really interchangeable. So we have a room, so there's a ceiling on top. Everything that is inside that room, that is where the met is. Everything that is in that room is going to be tameh. Now we have a number of doors, a number of entrances going off that room. So by each door, so if you imagine, if you walk past the doorway, there's still the ceiling on top. So that area, that is now in a separate area from where the met was. Nonetheless, in those areas underneath that ceiling, we say is going to be tameh as well. Why? Because ultimately the met is going to be brought out there, and that's why it's going to be. Now, if you know where the met is going to be taken out of, and it's only one of them, so only that one's going to be tameh. And that's what our Mishnah is going to discuss. So, but at this point, we say all of them. Right? So again, in the Gemara, it says, Atnan amet babait v'lo ptachim arbe. There are many different entrances, doorways, right? Kulan tmein. All of them are going to now be tameh in the same way. That's if they all have the same status. Or if they're all open or they're all closed, it's going to be the same. Niftach echad mehen hu tameh v'kulan tolim. Okay. If only one of them is open, so it's the doorway, that area where it's open, that's going to be tameh, and all the others are going to be tar. Again, when we say it's tameh tar, we mean there's going to be kelim in that room, and those kelim are now going to contract tumah. Says Rashi, niftach echad mehem le'achar mitat hamet, after the deceased is there, hu tameh. Ben kelim de kala, ben kelim de levasof amuvain labachutz. So it says that one is going to be a tameh. Whatever kelim are there, whatever's already been there, whatever's going to be brought there, only from now, that's all tameh. And all the other ones are torin, kulan torin. Says ledivra kol. This halacha so far, this is agreed by everybody. Mukminan lo demodu akol mikan ulahaba. Okay, in other words, from now on, anything that's brought into that area, any kelim that are brought there are going to remain tahor, that aren't going to contract tumah. The vadai b'hau the niftach mapikle. The door that's been open is the one that it's going to be taken out of. Okay, so essentially like this again. The tumat ohel, first of all, applies wherever is actually in the oil, together in the oil with the met. we said it's also going to apply in the areas through which the doorway, the corridor through which the met is going to be taken out. So if when the person dies or when the corpse is there, all the doors are closed, so we say that's Tumah is now going to apply by all of those entryways because we don't know where he's going to be taken out. So any kelim that are in any of those areas now, those have already become tameh. They've got tumat met. However, if you now open one of the doorways, we say from now on, only that doorway which is open, only that area is going to contract tumah, and the others are not, because it's clear that the met is going to be taken out of the doorway that is open. So if you now bring more kelim to the other side, those won't become tameh. Okay. Then says the Mishnah as follows. Chashav lotzio be'echad mehem. Okay, so the first case was where you open one of the doors. Now you don't open any of the doors, or maybe they're all open in the first place. But chashav lotzio be'echad mehem, you had now intent, you had kavanah to take the mate out of one of the doorways, or b'chalon sheyesh bo arba al arba, or if to take it through a window, if a window that has got 4 by 4 tfachim, that is going to be the amount that Chachamim said that that's big enough that you could take the mate out. Okay. Now it says matzelet al kol haptachim kulam. That is going to save, so to speak, all the other entrances. Not that you opened the door, but that you had in mind to take the mate out of that door, out of that entrance. Now all the other entrances are not going to contract tumah anymore. Beit Shammai omrim. Now here comes the machloket. Beit Shammai omrim v'hu shechashav lotzio ad shelo yamut hamet. Ubeit Hillel omrim af mi sheyamut hamet. Okay, so the question is this: At what point do we say this? We're saying that again, our default position was all the doors are open or all the doors are closed. Whatever it is, they all have the same status. We're saying that all the kelim in all those areas are now going to contract the tumah. If you had the intention that the mate is going to be brought out of one of the doorways specifically, only that one contracts tumah, and all the others do not. When did you have that intention? When does it work from? Beit Shammai says it only works if before the person died. Okay, you got the person sitting at home, they're terminally ill, you know that is going to be a mate soon, and you have in mind, okay, when lo aleinu, when this happens, the person passes away, the corpse is going to be brought out through door A. So that's before it's happened, and therefore when it's a met, we've already decided in our minds which doorway it's going out of, and therefore all the whatever kelim are in the other doorways are not going to get tumah. Fine, that's Beit Shammai. But Beit Hillel says, af mi sheyamut hamet. He says even when it's if it takes place afterwards, even if you only considered it after the person had died. So let's see Rashi. And we'll see here how this is going to be related to Breira, to our case. So Rashi just says, arba al arba b'kach she'alui le'otzat metim. That's what we said. Matzelet al kol haptachim miletamei ke'ilu niftach. Right, the fact that the Mishnah said before that if you open one of the doors, so that certainly prevents the others from getting tumah. Also, if you have in mind, it's going to have the same effect. So says Beit Hillel, af mi sheyamut hamet, even if this is only after there is a met there. Says Rashi, v'kas al kadatach, and this is what we understand at this point. It means the breira pligi. We're dealing with a case of breira. Ubekelim shayu bahem ben mita lemachshava. The kelim are already there. Right. What's the point? What are we saying? We know that the met is going to be taken out of one of the doorways. That's obvious. It's going to be taken out of one of them, one of the doorways or the window, whatever it is. Which one is it? We don't know. It's only afterwards that we find out. So that's a classic case of breira. So you'll say like this, but here I was saying breira. Therefore, or even though before we knew about it, we would have thought that the kelim that were there, bein mita lemachshava, before you decided which one was going out of, that those won't become tameh. Beit Shammai savri lo amrinanu v'al demekal adat elachi. Beit Shammai said we can't say that we knew that all along his intention was to go out that way. And therefore the tumah didn't come out to the other ptachim. No. Beit Shammai says you can't say that. However, Beit Hillel, continues Rashi, Beit Hillel Savri Uvra, say yes. Ulamai Tasal Kadat Achash Tasvir Alan. ונפתח אחד מהם, נמו הבו פליקי בכלים דמי קלה ותולין. That which you'll say, what about the previous case where one of those were open? So would we think there that there's a machloket as well in terms of the kelim that were there before? So he says the katani la'el divrei hakol bekelim demikanu laba. Says no. So in the case where the door was opened, says Rashi, that's no machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. That's only the kelim that are brought there from now that are not going to become tamei in the other doorways. But in the case of where you had in mind, so at this point in the Gemara, we understand that Beit Hillel is saying breira, and again, that's difficult based on our case with the birds. So says the Gemara, not so simple, not so clear that that's actually what Beit Hillel meant. It says, "Ha itma ala." We're 5 lines from the bottom of the page, the end of the line, and the Gemara says, "Ha itma ala amaraba letaher et aptachim mikanu lehaba." וכן אמר רבי יושע לתאר את הפתחים מכאן ולהבא, מכאן ולהבא in, למפרע לא. Okay, so this is answer number 1. Answer number 1 is this is not a case of breira, because what Beit Shammai are saying, what Beit Hillel are saying, is only mikan ulahaba. It's only from now, from the time, when at the time that a person died, you had kelim in all these different tachim, all those kelim become tameh. Right? Beit Hillel agrees. Then 5 minutes later, half an hour later, whatever it is, at that point you decide, okay, we're going to bring the mate out of this entrance, out of this petach. So at that point, okay, any kelim that you bring to the other petachim now will not become tamei. Similar to the case where the doorway was open. But the kelim that were there already in the first place, are we going to go retroactively? No, that we don't. That does not change. And therefore, we don't have a proof from here that Beit Hillel holds breira, because this is not a case of breira, because it's only mikano lahaba. And therefore, in our Mishnah, when Beit Hillel comes along and says zeh v'zeh ani notel, that makes sense. That is opinion number 1. Okay, so that is what the Gemara says. Maraba letayat aptachim mikano lahaba. V'chen amar Rabbi Yoshia letayat aptachim mikano lahaba. Right, Rabbi says it. Rabbi Yoshia says the same thing, and then the Gemara spells it out. It says mikano lahaba in. From now onwards, yes. Lemafreya, lo. Yeah, so that is answer number 1. Answer number 2, says the Gemara, Rava amar leolam lemafreya. Rava says, no, actually, the way we understood Beit Hillel, it's lemafreya, it's correct. From the time that you say that this is the petach where the mate is going to be taken out, so all the other kelim that are in the other ptachim, before I thought they were tamei, actually they are not tamei. It works retroactively as well. Why then do we say differently when it comes to the birds? So it says, Rava amar leolam lemafreya. V'hacha ayin our Mishnah regarding Yom Tov, hainu tama, dilma metaltel v'shavik, If you hadn't designated specific birds, okay, so then Beit Hillel is also going to be concerned. You're going to pick one up, you're going to put it down, you pick up another one, you'll put it down. And you end up picking up muktzah and carrying muktzah because you don't want these birds. Says the Gemara, V'ha amart be'omed v'omer zeh v'zeh ani notel sagya. But you said that if you stand there and you don't pick, right, and you just say, you just say this and this I'm taking, that's enough. So why then, again, are we not concerned at the same time that you're going to go and you're going to pick up those birds and you won't be happy with them? So he says, Erev Yom Tov. That was on Erev Yom Tov. Once you've designated on Erev Yom Tov, says Beit Hillel, once you've designated these specific birds that you want, so then we're not going to be concerned that you're going to pick them up or not. But if you don't designate specific ones, you just say, I'm taking from here, then there is a concern. Rashi says, V'amata be'omed, second last line of Rashi, V'amata be'omed melchok, standing from afar, V'ein menanea, you don't lift them up. That was exactly the concern Beit Shammai had. That's why they said you have to go and lift them up physically. Alma lo badak me'etmol, ha'chushim v'shmenim, Again, what are we concerned about? The Gemara is going to say it now in the next Amud. Here Rashi spells it out that one might be a fatter fowl and one may be less. There might not be so much meat on it. When you pick it up, when you stand from afar, you say, I want that one, but you can't really see it. It's only when you come close. So why aren't we concerned? And he said, Erev Yom Tov. He says, Klomar, Hecha di Adam Erev Yom Tov, Da'ani hu das minan. According to Beit Hillel, once you know on Erev Yom Tov, these are the ones that you have set aside, the two, Benchen Chushin, Benchen Shmenim, Lo Shakil Achrin. Then you'll find they're as big as you thought, they're not as big as you thought, nonetheless, you won't take others. So you know the others are muktzeh. You didn't set them aside. That was where you did all of this on Erev Yom Tov. Over the page, he says, Aval b'Yom Tov asur. But if it was on Yom Tov itself, in other words, if you were going to rely on Breira, if you were going to come before Erev Yom Tov and just say, well, you have to designate something because otherwise it's all muktzeh. But if you were going to come on Erev Yom Tov and say, I'll take the birds from here, and then on Yom Tov you come to see which ones you want, that is asur. Sometimes the ones that you thought were bigger were not as big, and the ones you thought had more meat had less meat, etc. You end up carrying something that is not appropriate, that is not fit, that is muktzeh. Says Rashi here at the top of Amud Bet, he says, Aval b'Yom Tov. If you come to designate, to choose which ones you want in Yom Tov itself, you didn't clarify it beforehand. And you're relying on the fact that what you'll come and find on Yom Tov itself, the ones that you look from afar, and those look like those are the bigger birds which have lots of meat on them, and it turns out are not so, but mishmushan, and the same thing, vice versa. All the ones that you picked up for were actually muktzeh, and then you weren't allowed to. So there's okay. So we'll just carry on the next line in the Gemara. It says, "Inami." Alternative answer: Zimnin demishtach kulu chushim v'shavik lehu v'ati limnuei misimchat Yom Tov. Or you might come and you might find that none of the birds actually are as meaty as you had thought, and then you'll leave them all behind. Again, because you haven't designated specific ones, and then you will not have Simchat Yom Tov because you'll end up without any. So in order to prevent that, so those are the two different answers that we give over there. Okay, what comes out according to this, something interesting. What if a person came and said, okay, I'm going to designate all of them, in order that they didn't want to come and designate the specific birds beforehand. They also don't want to be over on muktzah. So he said, I'm going to designate all of them, which I might take, even though you only need 2 of the birds or 3 of the birds for your meal, but in order that you shouldn't come to transgress muktzah. So the Meiri says that would be okay. You'd be allowed to do that. But others, the Vilna Gaon, and this is actually brought in the Shulchan Aruch, says you can't do that. That is going to be sort of like harama. If you only need the 2 birds, you come along and you say you're going to designate all of them, that is not satisfactory. That doesn't actually work. Let me show it to you in the Shulchan Aruch. He brings it up. Yeah, it's in Kuf Tzadik Vav, which is near the beginning of Hilchot Yom Tov. Sorry, one moment. Taf Tzadik Vav. Sorry, that's why it's not coming up. Okay, let me share screen with you all. Okay, here's the Shulchan Aruch. You can see in Seif Yud Alef. He says, "Im zemen kol hashovach ve'eno tzarech ela lezug." Right? If a person came and they said, "I'm going to set aside, designate the entire shovach, the entire dovecote, because but I only really need 2 of the birds." He says, "Eino moil." That does not apply. That does not work. So as the Rama, if he might need it, so then then he says based on Rabbi Yerucham, then you could set aside all the birds and then you just end up taking what you need. But that was where there was a real possibility you might have needed all of them. If you just set them all aside because you don't want to transgress muktzah, that doesn't work, as we said. Just an interesting question that came up in the Chashukei Chemed. So we mentioned about taking the mate out through one of the doorways, one of the entrances, or even through the window. So this is a question that came up in Tzfat many years ago about a Rav who wanted to come in through the window. It says, Sheila shamati mesaplim shalidbaz shaya av beit in Tzfat baa lebeit hakneset lidrosh b'Shabbat hagadol v'ra'a she'atzibur hagadol gadash et hamakom. He came to give his drasha Shabbat hagadol. We know how the shul can fill up, and there was no place. There's no place for him to come in. And the Rav lo ratzah latricham. He didn't want to could be a tircha, make people move, etc. V'lachen nichnas derech hachalon. So he came up. This is the Ridbaz. He climbed through the window into the shul. People were, looking at this in amazement. This is not befitting. This is not appropriate for a Talmid Chacham to go and climb through the window. That's the question. So he says, Tshuva. We know based on our Gemara, we have the question of bringing the mate out of the house. If Shalut Achad Leotzio B'Dochak Derech HaProzdor Tzal V'Akum, שאז תוכלו לעקם את המיטה או לעקיפה, או להוציאה דרך החלון שנראה קצת מבוזה. He says, if you have two possibilities, either there's a very narrow doorway, so you can carry the mat through there, but you're going to have to, lift it up a little bit, and it's not such a nice way to take it out. Or you can go through the window, but the window looks a little bit like maybe that's not so respectful. He says, based on our Gemara, you can see that one of the options was to take the maid out of the window, and nobody says that there's a problem with that. And therefore, in such a case, he says there's no chashash of bizayon amet. So what about the Rav who climbed through the window into the shul? He says, Binyanenu, here at the bottom, Binyanenu lagabei knisat chacham der chalon, nireh shekol hanaga shekulam roim sheyesh la siba mutzdeket. He says, if there was a reason for it, it's not just that the guy's climbing through the window for fun, but there's a reason and it's logical. Then mutar lasota, that's okay. Even though ordinarily that might look a little bit disparaging. ולכן כשנקרא לכולם, here we are. ולכן כשנקרא לכולם שנכנס מהחלון כדי שלא להטריח את העם. If everybody can see and everybody knows that the reason he's climbing in through the window is because there's a huge crowd there and doesn't want to cause טרחת הציבור, so that's okay. כהן זה מסופר לאחד מחומי ירושלים שמר להדליק נרות חנוכה במוצאי שבת קודש. And so I saw this was just a joke, but they say, they always say on Motzei Shabbat Chanukah, everybody's in such a rush, they're jumping out the windows to go back and light their candles. It says there was a story. There was one of the Chochmei Yerushalayim. They wanted to light Chanukah candles in time on Motzei Shabbat Chanukah. ולא יכל ללכת לביתו בדרך הרגילה, כי היה שם אחד שהדריך בתפילה. Okay, that's a sugya in and of itself. But there was somebody who was blocking the entrance because he was still davening, and the halakha is you're not meant to go more than within 4 amot in front of somebody who's davening. Okay, there is a shaila if somebody is standing at the entrance to the shul and they're davening longer, and so then maybe it doesn't apply. But in any event, this was the case. He couldn't go past, and yatzala beito derech hachalon, and he went out through the window. Okay, so that was just an interesting piece in the Chashukei Chemed I thought to share. And Adkan. So next week we will carry on. We're on to the next Mishnah. Still continuing with this idea of Azmana, of Yonim. That's the Yud Amud. We'll pick up there from next week. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Have a good day. Shabbat Shalom.